Hi everyone, I'm Rachel Arnett. I'm a doctoral student here at HBS, and today I'm excited to share my work with you about expressing minorities' willingness to express their cultural identities at work. While I'm focusing on expression of cultural identities, I'll also be referencing personal identity expression, which is more related to gender as well. So I just want to quickly give you a synopsis of some related work that I'm doing that I'm building on. So this previous work investigates this notion in the literature that cultural identity expression by a minority is often assumed to result in less inclusive behaviors by majority group members, which is typically white Americans. And so we have this intuition. I wanted to investigate whether this was the case, and what I found was that actually when minorities talk about their cultural backgrounds in a rich and meaningful way, sharing thoughts and emotions about their cultural backgrounds, it actually, if anything, results in more inclusive behaviors by majority group members, both socially and professionally. So more likely to be invited to lunch, more likely to be invited to that important business meeting, for example. I wanted to investigate whether minorities have an intuition that this will be the case, or whether, in fact, minorities will assume that cultural identity expression leads to less inclusive behaviors and, as a result, will make them less willing to express their cultural backgrounds. And so I ran a study in which I had minorities just abstractly think about expressing their cultural identities to white coworkers. And they imagined expressing either their, talking about their work, or expressing their personal life, or expressing their cultural background. And then they were asked how they expected their white coworkers to respond. And what I found is that compared to when minorities imagined expressing their work, they actually expected to be more included when they talked about their personal lives, but less included when they talked about their cultural backgrounds. So they expected a penalty there. When it came to professional inclusion, compared to when minorities imagined discussing work, they expected to be less professionally included when they talked about either their personal lives or their cultural backgrounds, but this cultural penalty was expected to be the greatest. And when looking at their willingness to express their cultural backgrounds and personal lives, they were less willing to talk about personal life compared to work, and even less likely to want to discuss their cultural backgrounds. And so at first, this seems like it confirms this notion in the literature that minorities are hesitant to talk about their cultural backgrounds due to penalties from their majority group coworkers. But I wanted to investigate this further because sometimes what we think about in the abstract is a little bit different from what we find when we think about concrete scenarios. And so I ran another study in which I had minorities think about talking about different topics to a specific white coworker. So they, depending on condition, experimental condition, were told to imagine discussing a work topic, something about their personal background, focusing on richer, more intimate details about their personal life, something rich and intimate about their cultural background, or something surface level about their cultural background. And in all these cases, they actually had to write about a specific scenario or activity that they participated and imagine sharing it to that specific coworker, and they had to write out what that coworker's response would be. So it's really concretely going through the thought exercise. And so what I found was that compared to when minorities imagined discussing their work, they once again expected to be more socially included when they talked about their personal lives. But in contrast to the previous study, they expected to also be more socially included when they talked about their cultural backgrounds as well, whether it was rich or surface level. When I looked at expectations regarding professional inclusion compared to discussing work, they expected no differences in how much they would be professionally included if they talked about their personal life or their cultural backgrounds. And when looking at their willingness to express these different aspects of themselves, they were just as willing to talk about their personal lives as they were about their cultural backgrounds. And so I think what this work suggests is that, generally speaking, talking about aspects of our personal lives or our cultural backgrounds can be scary. It can be intimidating. And many times, in many contexts and with many people, this actually might be the case, right? Those might be justified feelings. However, I think it's at least worthwhile to consider whether or not you've reached this conclusion by thinking about things in the abstract. And if so, I think it's worthwhile to engage in the thought exercise of concretely considering how a specific coworker might respond to these types of expressions. And perhaps we might find ourselves feeling empowered to be more authentic in the workplace. When you pair this with my other work that I shared a little bit of at the beginning, I think it does actually suggest that the minorities can actually do this to a greater degree and actually gain a greater sense of inclusion. Thank you.